When I opened that drawer, I thought I'd find old tax papers, maybe some loose change or receipts. Instead, I found a photo that changed everything. It was a woman, smiling, standing on a beach at sunset. And she looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same jawline, same soft wave in her hair. She even stood the way I do, one shoulder slightly lower like she was shy but trying to look confident. My heart skipped. I turned the photo over. Written in ink, Anna, summer, 99. But I wasn't in that photo, and I wasn't even alive in that moment. I met my husband 10 years after it was taken. I stared at her face for a long time, confused, cold all over. I thought maybe it was a cousin or some weird coincidence. But when I showed the picture to my husband, Ethan, something in him changed. He didn't blink, didn't speak. He just stared at the photo like it had crawled out of a nightmare. I asked him, "Who is she?" And all he said was, "Mira, I need to tell you something." That's when I felt it, the shift. Like the ground wasn't solid anymore, because the look in his eyes wasn't just fear. It was guilt and heartbreak, and something darker I couldn't name. That was the moment I knew. Whatever came next would change everything I thought I knew about my husband, my family, and even myself. And I was right. It started out as an ordinary Sunday, the kind where the sun streams in through the kitchen blinds just right, and the smell of fresh coffee makes everything feel soft and safe. My daughter, Lila, was curled up on the living room rug drawing with her markers. Ethan was outside mowing the lawn. I had just finished folding laundry when I walked past his old study and remembered the project I'd been putting off for months. The plan was to clear out the study and turn it into an art space for Lila. She's always sketching her dreams. Houses that float in the sky, animals that talk, people with wings. She'd been asking for her own creative room since spring, and I finally had the time. It felt like the perfect little surprise. The study hadn't changed in years. Same creaky chair, same dusty computer, same messy bookshelf stacked with Ethan's college textbooks and sci-fi novels. His old desk sat under the window, solid oak, beautiful but heavy, something he'd inherited from his grandfather. It was cluttered with pens, Post-it notes, a half-solved Rubik's Cube. The drawers were mostly empty, aside from some envelopes and expired insurance cards. I was halfway through cleaning it when I noticed one drawer wouldn't budge. It was locked, which was strange, because I didn't know Ethan kept anything locked. I gave it a gentle tug, then a harder pull, but it was sealed tight. I searched the desk for a key, and after a few minutes of feeling around the underside, I found it taped beneath the drawer. A small brass key, almost hidden under a layer of dust. I didn't feel nervous. Not yet. At that point, I was just curious. I assumed it held something boring, maybe work documents or personal letters. Ethan had always been private, but not secretive. At least not that I'd ever noticed. We'd been married for 11 years. We met in our late 20s through a mutual friend. Ethan was quiet, thoughtful, and kind. A little emotionally distant sometimes, but never unkind. He had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We got married after 2 years of dating. No drama, no red flags. He was solid, dependable, safe. My father, Ray, had his doubts about him early on. He said Ethan's eyes didn't match his smile, that his stories had gaps. But I figured that was just protective dad energy. After my mom died when I was 15, he tried to be both parents at once. I loved him for it, even when he pushed too hard. Still, I never saw anything in Ethan that made me afraid. He wasn't volatile. He didn't drink. He worked from home as a software engineer, cooked dinner twice a week, helped Lila with her math homework. We lived a quiet, structured life. Nothing in that study or in that house had ever made me feel unsafe. I turned the key in the drawer. It clicked open without resistance. Inside was a single manila envelope, thick and slightly yellowed at the edges. No label, no writing. I opened it and pulled out what looked like an old photograph. That's when I saw her. She looked so much like me that for a moment, I thought it was me. Same building, same long, dark hair, same freckle on the right cheek. Even the way she smiled, half gentle, half unsure, it felt like looking into a mirror. She was standing on a beach, barefoot, holding a sun hat against the wind. The ocean was behind her, waves curling into the shore. The photo had a warm tint like it was taken on film. I turned it over and read the handwritten note, Anna. Summer 99. A strange coldness crept through me. I was born in 1989. That photo was dated when I was 10 years old. This woman wasn't me. She was someone else entirely, but the resemblance wasn't casual. It was exact. I held the photo closer. Even the little scar above her right eyebrow matched mine. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe she was a cousin. Maybe Ethan dated someone who looked like me. Maybe it was all just coincidence. My mind scrambled for logic. I heard the lawnmower cut off outside. A moment later, Ethan came in through the back door. His shirt was damp with sweat, his hair messy. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey," he said, "you find any old treasure in there?" I didn't smile back. I held up the photo. "Ethan," I asked, "who is this?" He looked at the picture, and he stopped, just stopped, like someone had hit pause on his body. His mouth parted slightly. His hands fell to his sides. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice was flat, tense. "It was in the locked drawer," I said. "Why is this woman in your desk? Why does she look like me?" He reached for the photo, but I didn't hand it over. "Who is she?" I asked again. He swallowed, took a step back. Then he whispered something that didn't feel like an answer. "Mira, I need to tell you something." And in that second, I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know what he was about to say, but every part of me already understood this wasn't something small. It wasn't a forgotten memory or an old flame. It was something buried, something broken, something that had been waiting to rise. And now it had. I stood in the middle of the study holding the photo like it was made of glass. My breath was shallow. Ethan didn't move. He looked like he'd just seen someone rise from the dead. For a man who always kept his emotions tucked away, the fear in his eyes was loud. "I'm going to ask one more time," I said. "Who is she?" He looked at me, then down at the floor, as if answering meant crossing some invisible line. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Her name was Anna. She was someone I knew before you, a long time ago." "She looks exactly like me," I said. "That's not normal. Who was she to you?" He hesitated again. It was like pulling words from someone who wanted to bury them. Finally, he said, "She was someone I loved. We were engaged." My heart started pounding. "Engaged? You've never told me that." "It didn't seem important anymore," he said. "That part of my life was over." He reached out like he wanted to take the photo from me, but I stepped back. "You don't get to decide when the past stops mattering, not when it looks like me." He closed his hand and stepped away. The silence between us was thick. Lila called from the living room, asking for a snack. I told her I'd be there in a minute. My voice cracked, but I tried to sound steady. Ethan rubbed his hands over his face. "I'll explain everything, but not here, not like this. Tonight, after Lila's asleep. Please." I didn't trust him, but I nodded. I needed answers, and I needed him to give them without shutting down. That night, I tucked Lila in early. She asked if I was okay. I kissed her forehead and told her I was just tired. She stared at me for a moment, then handed me a drawing she made that afternoon. 2 women standing side by side under a red sky. One was crying. The other looked like she was burning. I kissed her again and walked out of the room, feeling like the walls were closing in. Ethan was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table. His hands were folded. There was a quiet heaviness to the room that made my chest feel tight. "I'm listening," I said. He looked at me, then started to speak. Her name was Anna Whitmore. We met in college. She was studying literature. We got engaged after graduation. I thought we were going to build a life together. I even bought this house for us before it was renovated, but it never happened. "What happened to her?" I asked. He looked down. "She died in a house fire. It was ruled accidental. But the police investigated me for months. There were questions about how the fire started, about where I was. People whispered. My parents stopped talking to me for a while. I lost most of my friends. I left town not long after the funeral." The air seemed to disappear from the room. My stomach twisted. "And you didn't think that was worth telling me?" I asked. "I tried," he said, "a few times. But you looked so much like her, Mira. It scared me at first. I thought it was a trick my mind was playing on me. But then I got to know you, and you weren't her. You were kind in ways she never was. Softer, warmer." "That's not comforting," I said. He sighed. I didn't fall in love with you because you looked like her. I stayed with you because you didn't feel like a shadow. You felt real. Then why keep her picture? I asked. In a locked drawer? Because I couldn't throw her away, he said. I loved her once. I lost her in a way that never made sense. I wasn't ready to let go. I locked it away so it wouldn't affect us. So I wouldn't look at it and start comparing things. I didn't want to let that grief bleed into what we had. I stared at him. I didn't know whether to believe him or run. My brain tried to stitch the pieces together. A dead fiancé, a house fire, a secret drawer, a woman who looked like me in a photo taken 10 years before we ever met. I need time, I said finally. This doesn't feel real. He nodded. I know, I'll answer anything. Just, please don't shut me out. I walked away and went straight to the bedroom. I shut the door and sat on the edge of the bed holding the photo again. Anna, that was her name. I searched her face for some kind of difference, something that would prove I was imagining the resemblance. But every time I looked, I saw myself. I called my father. What's wrong? He asked the second he picked up. I found a photo of a woman who looks exactly like me. Ethan says it's his ex-fiancée. She died in a fire. He never told me. I found it in a locked drawer. Ray didn't even hesitate. You and Lila need to come stay with me. No, I said. Not yet. I'm not afraid of him, but I'm going to find out who she really was. Ray was quiet, then said, if you won't come here, promise me you'll dig deep. Something's off. I can feel it. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Anna Whitmore. I repeated the name in my head like a riddle, because something wasn't adding up. Her face wasn't just similar, it was mine, and I was going to find out why. The next morning, I watched Ethan pour cereal into Lila's bowl like everything was normal. He kissed her on the forehead, asked if she wanted strawberries with it, and smiled when she said yes. He looked like the same man who used to dance with her in the living room at bedtime. The same man who'd once built her a cardboard rocket ship on a rainy afternoon. But I didn't see him the same anymore. I couldn't. Not after what he'd told me. Not after that photo. I spent the rest of the day moving like I was underwater. I took Lila to the park, answered a few texts from friends, smiled when I needed to. But the image of Anna haunted every quiet second. I kept thinking about how Ethan had described the fire, how the investigation lingered around him, how his parents had pulled away. I'd never even met them. I always thought that was strange, but he said they were private and didn't travel. Now it felt like that had been a carefully controlled story. That night, after Lila went to sleep, I opened my laptop and started searching. I typed in Anna Whitmore Fire Denver, 1999. The first few results were generic. Articles about fire safety, unrelated obituaries. I tried different combinations. Anna Whitmore death, Anna Whitmore obituary, house fire Denver, 1999. And then I found it. Young woman, killed in house fire, foul play not suspected. The article was brief, only a few paragraphs. Anna Whitmore, 20, died in an early morning house fire in late August of 1999. Authorities had investigated the cause and concluded it was accidental. A faulty gas line was blamed. It mentioned a fiancé who was home at the time and survived with minor injuries. His name wasn't listed, but I knew it had to be Ethan. There was no photo of Anna, just a mention that she had no surviving siblings and had been adopted at birth by a local couple. She had been in college studying literature. Her parents declined interviews. The article ended with a line about how her ashes had been scattered along the coast near where the couple had vacationed the summer before. Something about that article bothered me. No photo, no follow-ups, no mention of any investigation into Ethan, even though he said the police had questioned him for months. I decided I needed to dig deeper. The next morning, while Ethan was in a video meeting for work, I texted my father and asked if he could watch Lila for a few hours. I told him I needed to go to the county records office. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Be careful." I drove across town and requested Anna Whitmore's birth and death certificates. It took some convincing, but I got what I needed. I sat in the hallway outside the records office with the papers in my lap, heart pounding. Her death certificate confirmed what the article had said, but it was the birth certificate that stopped me. Anna had been born in the same hospital as me, on the same day, same year, August 14th, 1989. The parents listed were different from mine. She had been adopted at birth, but her original name, before the adoption, was handwritten in faded blue ink at the bottom. Baby girl, Mira. My hands shook. I read it again. There was no last name listed. Just a note that she had a twin, but the second child had been placed with a separate agency and adopted 2 weeks later. I stared at the paper, trying to breathe. I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. I was Anna's twin. I didn't even know I had a sister. I called the agency listed on the certificate, not expecting much. A woman named Celeste answered. She sounded kind but guarded. I explained that I was trying to understand my adoption history. She paused for a moment, then said, "Your file is closed, but give me your name and I'll see what I can legally share." I gave her my full name, birth date, and adopted parents' names. There was silence on the line for a moment too long. Then she said, "Yes. There is something unusual in your file. It shows that you were part of a twin birth, but your adoptive parents only took one child. The other was placed with a different family. You were never told?" "No," I said. My voice was hollow. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That information was withheld at the request of your adoptive parents." I ended the call and sat there for a long time. All the little things over the years started clicking into place. The dreams I used to have as a child of fire and shadows, the ache I felt when I looked at the ocean, the strange sense of familiarity I had when Ethan first kissed me. That night, I didn't tell Ethan what I had found. Not yet. I needed time to process it. But when Lila showed me another one of her drawings before bed, I almost cried. It was 2 little girls in a hospital nursery. One was in color, the other just a faint outline. Lila looked up at me and said, "She feels sad sometimes. The girl in my dreams. She says she used to have a sister." I kissed her on the forehead and held her close, trying to stay calm. I had a sister, and I married the man she almost married. Now I needed to know the truth about what really happened to her, and why Ethan never told me who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. I kept watching Ethan from across the room as he dozed beside me, unaware that everything I believed about my life had just shifted. I wasn't who I thought I was. I had a twin sister I never knew, and she had died in this very town, engaged to the man I now called my husband. The next morning, I told Ethan I needed to talk. We sat at the kitchen table. I placed the birth certificate and adoption records in front of him. He didn't touch them. He didn't ask questions. He just stared. "You knew," I said. "You knew Anna and I were related." His face went pale. He pressed his hands together and slowly exhaled. "Not at first," he said. "When I met you, I didn't know. I thought it was a strange coincidence, a cruel one. But after we started dating, there were things you said. The way you moved, the way you looked at the ocean, the way you laughed when you were nervous. They were the same." My chest tightened. "And you never thought I deserved to know?" He looked up at me, his voice quiet. I was terrified. I thought if I told you, I'd lose you. I didn't know how to explain any of it without sounding insane. I barely believed it myself. I pushed the papers toward him. "Anna and I were twins. We were separated at birth. You loved her. You were engaged, and you married me." He closed his eyes. "It wasn't planned. I didn't seek you out. I didn't even believe it could be possible at first. But when I found out, I felt like I was being given a second chance." I stood up. "A second chance? With her sister? That's not love, Ethan. That's possession. That's grief you wrapped in a new name." He didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. And that scared me more than anything. I asked him something I had been holding back. "Did you start that fire?" His head jerked up. "Number never." "You were the only one home," I said. "You were investigated." "And cleared," he replied. "The fire was caused by a gas leak. It was proven." "But you left town," I said. "You changed your name. You buried her photo in a locked drawer. You never told me anything." "I left because I was broken," he said. "I didn't want to live in a town where people crossed the street to avoid me, where they looked at me like I was a murderer." I paced the room, heart pounding. "Why did you never tell me about Anna after we were married? You saw how much I looked like her. You knew. You had years to come clean." He stood too, his voice rising. "Because I loved you. Not as a replacement, not as a ghost. You were real. You were different. And when I found out you were her twin, I didn't know how to hold that truth without destroying everything we had built. I backed away from him, suddenly needing space between us. Did she know about me? I asked. Did Anna know she had a sister? He shook his head. Number. She always said she felt like part of her was missing. She hated being alone. She was intense, passionate, angry sometimes. She loved fiercely, but always like she was afraid it would be taken from her. She never said anything about a sister. I felt something shift in my chest. Grief for a girl I never met. For a version of me that lived a different life. One I never got to see. I pulled something from my pocket and set it on the table. Lila's drawing. The one with the two girls, one in color, the other in outline. She dreams about her, I said. She says the girl feels sad, that she talks to her, that she says she used to have a sister. Ethan stared at the drawing for a long time. He didn't say a word. I don't know what I believe anymore, I said, but I believe I need space. I need to understand who I am outside of what you tried to protect me from. I need time to grieve for her, and maybe for us too. He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I'll go stay somewhere else. No, I said. Lila and I will go. I don't want her here right now. I don't want her feeling the weight of this. I need to talk to my father. I need to stop pretending this is normal. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and gently woke Lila. I told her we were going to visit Grandpa Ray. She smiled, sleepily happy, and grabbed her stuffed fox. On the drive to my father's, she looked out the window and whispered, "She's not sad anymore. She said thank you." I didn't ask who. I already knew. My father opened the front door before I could knock. He looked at me, then at Lila sleeping in my arms, then back at me again. He didn't ask anything. He just pulled us into his arms and held us. For the next few days, I stayed in my old bedroom. The posters were gone, but the smell of wood polish and the faint sound of wind through the trees outside the window hadn't changed. It was strange how comfort could live in the same place where grief started to settle. I would wake in the night, holding Lila close, thinking of Anna. I never knew her, but I mourned her as if I had. I started reading more about her. I visited the public library and went through microfilm records, searching for traces of her life. I found an old college article she wrote about women in Gothic literature. Her words were sharp, curious, and a little sad. She had been complex, private, but brilliant. I saw reflections of myself in the things she loved and the way she phrased her thoughts. I also called the adoption agency again. I requested a copy of anything they could legally send me from my file. They mailed a package that included a faded medical report and a letter written by my birth mother. It wasn't long, just a few lines about why she felt she couldn't keep us. She asked whoever adopted us to tell us we were loved. She didn't even know we'd be separated. I sat on the porch the night I read it, watching the sun sink behind the pine trees, and cried for the girl who never got to read that letter, for the twin who didn't know she was one of two, for the family we could have had. Ethan texted every day, asking how Lila was doing, if I was safe, if I needed anything. He didn't ask me to come home. He didn't try to explain further. I think he understood that silence now said more than any words could. After 2 weeks, I agreed to meet him at a public park near the lake. Layla stayed with my father. When I arrived, Ethan was already sitting on a bench, holding a small envelope in his hands. He stood when he saw me. He looked thinner, like he hadn't been sleeping. He handed me the envelope without speaking. I opened it and saw Anna's photo inside, the one I had found in the drawer. Underneath it was a letter. I sat down beside him and started to read. In the letter, Ethan wrote about Anna, how he had loved her with everything he had, but how their relationship had started to unravel in the final months. He said she had struggled with depression, had started talking about fate and loss and fire. He admitted that the night of the fire they had fought. She had accused him of trying to leave her. He had gone to sleep on the couch. He woke to smoke. He said he blamed himself for a long time, not because he caused the fire, but because he didn't know how to help her, because he didn't recognize how deep her pain had become. When the investigators cleared him, it didn't matter. He had already sentenced himself. Then, years later, he met me, and seeing me felt like time had folded in on itself. At first, he avoided me, But something pulled him back. He tried to see me as someone new, someone whole. He said he loved me, not because I looked like Anna, but because I healed parts of him he didn't think were still alive. When he learned the truth, that I was her twin, he had a panic attack. He almost left. But by then, we had Lila, and he couldn't imagine a life without us. I folded the letter carefully. "You could have told me," I said, "years ago. You should have." "I know," he said. "I was a coward. I thought if I buried the truth deep enough, I could move on. But the truth doesn't stay buried. Not forever." We sat there quietly, the sound of wind moving through the trees around us. Finally, I asked him a question that had been growing louder in my chest. "Do you think you ever stopped loving her?" He paused. "Number. But loving her doesn't mean I love you less. It means I carry both of you now, and I always will." I nodded, not because it was okay, but because it was honest. And in that moment, I finally saw him not as the man who kept secrets, but as someone who had been broken long before I met him. I didn't know if we would rebuild from here, but I knew we had to start with the truth. Later that evening, I took Lila to the lake. She asked if she could throw a flower into the water. She picked a wild daisy and walked to the shore, standing silently for a moment before letting it go. The petals floated gently, spinning on the surface. "Was that for your dream friend?" I asked. She nodded. She said thank you again. She said she doesn't feel alone now. I knelt beside her, holding her hand as we watched the daisy drift out of sight. In that moment, I realized something. I didn't have to choose between grieving Anna and being Mira. I could be both the sister who survived and the woman who lived. I could carry the past without letting it break me. I could honor her by living honestly, by raising my daughter with the kind of love that keeps no secrets. Some stories don't end in resolution. Some end in truth. And for me, that was enough. If this story moved you or made you think about the quiet corners of your own family history, I want to thank you for staying with me until the end. Sometimes we live our whole lives thinking we know who we are, only to discover there's a version of our story that was written long before we ever opened the first page. I didn't set out to uncover a mystery. I just wanted to clean out a desk. But what I found was the truth, and the weight and freedom that comes with it. If this video resonated with you, please like it. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have a story of your own or something this made you feel, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want more real-life stories that dive deep into the emotions we hide behind everyday life, subscribe to the channel. There's more coming, and I'd love to have you here when it does. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself and each other.